Chapter 7. It didn't take long to find what she wanted. But then, standing beneath the weathered sign of Pine Ridge Cemetery, she realized it didn't look anything like she remembered. There hadn't been gates where she'd come in before. There hadn't been a fence or a sign. Maybe this isn't the right cemetery. Maybe Pine Ridge has more than one. But the old man she'd asked outside the post office hadn't even hesitated. He'd pointed her straight in this direction. The old part and the new part, he'd explained to her, with the empty old church still standing guard at one end. "You were disoriented last night. You were terrified. Of course nothing's going to look the same today." Lucy glanced up and down the narrow, deserted street. Directly across from her was an empty lot. A block away, the street suddenly ended, giving way to an overgrown field and a rickety, boarded-up house set far back beneath some trees. There was no traffic here. Not a single pedestrian in sight. "Well, what are you waiting for? Just go in and get it over with." Lucy began walking. She hadn't expected the place to be so big, much bigger than it looked from the sidewalk, with row upon row of perfectly aligned headstones and carefully placed markers. The grass was spongy, littered with remnants of last night's storm. Plastic flowers lay everywhere, along with shredded plants and broken vases, toppled wreaths, and even some soggy toys. As Lucy walked farther, she began to notice a distinct difference in her surroundings. How the ground seemed to be actually sinking, rainwater standing in shallow pools. How the trees seemed to be pressing closer, weaving their branches more tightly overhead. And yes, she thought suddenly, fear and hope beating together, fluttering in her chest. Yes, this all seems familiar. Back here, so far from the cemetery's entrance, these graves had been forgotten. Patches of dead weeds pushed against tombstones. Piles of dead leaves obliterated names. It was colder here, and piercingly damp. Locks hung rusted from mausoleum doors, heavily shrouded in spider webs. Stone angels and sleeping children, once meant to be comforting, now gazed back at Lucy with hollow eyes and moldy faces. Their tender smiles rotted away. As though weary of their burden, many headstones had slipped quietly beneath the ivy. Others were crumbled to dust. Lucy stopped beside an unmarked grave and lowered her face into her hands. "What am I doing here, Mom? Can you even believe this?" Suddenly she was furious with herself. She must have been insane to come here, wandering around alone in this isolated place instead of being in school. Did you really think you'd find her, some dead girl in an open grave? There were hundreds of burial plots in here, thousands probably. How long could she possibly keep searching? Not to mention how enraged Irene would be when she found out Lucy had skipped school. "Bad idea," Lucy whispered to herself. "Very bad idea." Forget good intentions. She'd leave this place now and find a payphone. Promise or no promise, she'd make an anonymous call to the police, and then she'd get back to the house. She'd go straight to bed, and when Irene came home, she'd swear she really had been sick all day. But next Monday she'd be, miraculously, recovered and more than ready to begin her new life. Resolved, Lucy raised her head. She hunched her shoulders against the cold, dank breeze and turned back the way she'd come. She was scarcely aware of his shadow. There were so many of them, really, surrounding her in deep, dark pools, soft and black like liquid, oozing between the graves, seeping beneath the low, sweeping branches of the trees. And later she would wonder how he got there, appearing without a word or a sound, just suddenly there, his tall shadow figure blocking her path, one arm extended in front of her to prevent her escape. She saw him gazing down at her, eyes without light, face without features. Or was it her own fear distorting his image, blurring everything into an indistinct mask. She wanted to run, but she was frozen in place. She heard his voice, but it seemed like some strange, faraway echo. "She's not here," he said. "The one you're looking for." Lucy could barely choke out a whisper. "What? What are you talking about?" And the angels were watching. All around her, Lucy could see their blank, empty stares, their dead, decaying eyes. The stranger was above her now, leaning over, reaching out, a sharp black silhouette against pale, pale light. "She's not here," the stranger said again. "He's taken her away." Chapter 8. Someone had a hold of her shoulders. As Lucy fell back a step, she realized that strong hands were trying to steady her, to keep her facing forward. She willed herself to scream, but all that came out was a frightened whimper. "Take it easy," a voice said. "Just breathe." Breathe? Struck by a fresh wave of panic, Lucy began to struggle. The hands holding her immediately tightened their grip, and before she realized what was happening, she felt herself being pulled tight against her captor's chest. "Stop it. I'm not going to hurt you." Lucy stopped. With her arms pinned securely to her sides, she looked up to see a pair of dark eyes gazing back at her with calm, cool intensity. In a split-second appraisal, she guessed him to be a little over 6 feet tall, with a strong, lean build, probably about her own age, possibly a year or two older. High cheekbones accentuated the angles of his face. A faint shadow of beard ran along his chin and jawline and upper lip. His hair was thick and as black as his eyes, falling in loose, tousled waves to his shoulders. And he held himself very straight, though not so much a formal posture, she sensed, as a wary and watchful one. Lucy realized she was staring. As fear and confusion coursed through her, her mind scrambled for some self-defense tactic, but the rest of her still felt too stunned to cooperate. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again. "I just want to talk." He released her so unexpectedly that she nearly fell over. Recovering herself as best she could, Lucy watched as he took 3 steps back. Then he raised his hands into the air where she could see them. "You ran away," he stated. His eyes narrowed slightly, yet the piercing stare never wavered, even when Lucy began to back up. "What do you mean?" she demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you?" Her heart was racing like a trip hammer, her thoughts spinning in all directions. He knows about the girl. How could he know? The only way he could possibly know anything is if he was here. If he was the one who— "You tried to help her, but it was too late. And if you tell anyone at all, you could die." His tone was so even, so matter-of-fact, which somehow made it all the more frightening. Lucy's voice rose. "You don't know anything! You don't know—" "And they wouldn't believe you anyway." "Who are you?" "I'm Byron. I want to help you." "I don't know you, and I don't need your help. Why are you doing this? Why are you saying these things?" "Because they're true." Slowly he lowered his arms. He slid his hands into the pockets of his jacket, and he turned his eyes to the ground, and when he spoke, Lucy could hear the cold contempt in his voice. "It's not your fault, you know. You couldn't have saved her. Nobody could." Tears blurred Lucy's vision. Wheeling around, she was finally able to run. "This is insane. This can't be happening." She realized she was crying so hard she couldn't see, and her chest was hurting, and her lungs were aching from the cold. She slid on wet leaves and sank ankle-deep in mud. Every breath she took was a knife blade between her ribs. God, why had she ever come here this morning? How could she be so stupid? What could she possibly have been thinking? And now, on top of everything else, here was some psycho lurking in the graveyard, acting like he knew her, acting like he knew about what had happened here last night. Some psycho who must be the murderer. Who else could he be? He saw me and he knows who I am, and now it's a game. Cat and mouse. He's taunting me, and now he's going to kill me too. You're in danger, the voice warned. Lucy screamed. She hadn't heard him following, hadn't seen him coming, but now her back was flat against a tree, and he was standing there, just inches away, gazing at her with those dark, dark eyes. "People know I'm here," she babbled. "They'll be looking for me. They'll be worried if—" "I told you, you don't have to be afraid of me. I'm a friend." "Leave me alone. I don't have any friends." "But you need one. Someone you love is gone now. You need one." Lucy gaped at him. A wave of nausea rose up from her stomach, lodged in the middle of her throat. "I'm going to be sick. Oh, God, I'm—" "Sorry about your mother," he whispered. As Lucy drew an incredulous breath, all feelings of nausea vanished. She simply stood there with her mouth open, staring at him in utter disbelief. "Someone told you." At last her words choked out, tight with fury. "Someone had to tell you. My aunt or my cousin or someone at school." "No one had to tell me. I see it in your eyes." She was vaguely aware of a rushing in her head, a churning mixture of shock and rage and despair, and the tears that wouldn't stop, still pouring down her cheeks. For a moment she couldn't think, didn't even realize that she'd moved toward him, or that her hands had clenched into fists, or that she'd shoved them hard against his chest. "You really expect me to believe that?" she cried. She saw him shake his head, saw his hands close firmly over her fists, though he made no move to push her away. "Some things take time to believe in," he said solemnly. "And right now, we don't have a lot of time." As Lucy stared at him in bewilderment, he eased her hands from the front of his jacket. Then, still holding her wrists, he leaned down toward her, his voice low and urgent. "Something happened here last night. Something important." Yes, she thought desperately. A murder. A cold-blooded murder, and— "I think something touched you." "You don't know anything," Lucy whispered. "But what'd you touch?" Angela had asked. And the dying girl's hand, squeezing so hard. The pain, the horrible pain, the excruciating pain. And, "That's no bruise," Angela had said. "That's no bruise." "I think something was passed on to you," Byron murmured. Lucy's eyes widened. As she tried to pull free, Byron's grip tightened, forcing her closer. With one smooth movement, he turned both her hands palms up and gazed down at the tiny crescent-shaped scar. "Let go!" Jerking from his grasp, Lucy stumbled back out of reach. She could feel her right hand beginning to tingle, ice-hot needle pricks spreading out from the center, out to her fingertips, and she clamped it shut and thrust it deep into her pocket. She told herself it was just the cold, told herself Byron had just held her too tight, shut off her circulation. But her hand was stinging, feeling so strange, and it was starting to tremble, just like her knees were trembling, just like her voice was trembling. "Stay away from me!" she burst out. "I don't know why you're here, and I don't have a clue what you're talking about, and I'm not afraid of you." For a long moment, Byron stared at her. "It's not me you need to be afraid of," he said at last. It took every ounce of courage to turn her back on him. Holding her head high, Lucy made her way determinedly back through the graves, and she told herself that she wouldn't look back. But when she did, he was still standing there, and she couldn't help thinking how very much he resembled some dark angel, some ominous messenger in the midst of all that death. "Be careful," he called to her then, his voice as heavy as the shadows around him. "Someone won't be glad you're here." Chapter 9. The whole morning had been a disaster, a complete, miserable, and utter disaster. Lucy stood in the doorway of the cafeteria, clutching her books to her chest. She let her eyes wander over the laughing, chattering mass of students, then turned and walked slowly down the hall. She hadn't planned on coming to school this morning after her visit to the graveyard. She'd wanted to find a way back to the house and hide there and try to make sense of things. Until she suddenly remembered she didn't even have a key. She hadn't tried to find a payphone. You tried to help her. It was too late. She hadn't reported last night's murder. You can't tell anyone. You could die. They wouldn't believe you anyway. She'd been so frightened, so thoroughly shaken by her encounter with Byron, that she didn't even realize she'd retraced her steps back to school. She'd simply looked up and found herself standing outside Pine Ridge High, wondering how she'd gotten there. Oh, God, what's happening to my life? She'd stared at the school, and she'd weighed her options. Could I spend the day hiding out in some coffee shop? The library? How about the bus depot? But she hadn't been able to come to a single decision. He knew things. Byron knew things about last night. He knew things about me he couldn't possibly know. She'd rested her head against the fence while the world passed in a blur. He was a total stranger, but he'd known about her mother. He was a total stranger, yet it was almost as if he'd been waiting for her there, as if he'd expected her to show up there this morning. Maybe he really was the murderer, Lucy thought again. And maybe he really had been taunting her, playing with her, trying to see how much she really knew. So why didn't he kill me? Why didn't he kill me right then, when he had the perfect chance? She hadn't been able to shut out his words. She's not here, the one you're looking for. He took her away. His words, those frightening, fateful words playing over and over and over again, relentlessly through her brain. We don't have a lot of time. Be careful. Someone won't be glad you're here. She'd stood outside Pine Ridge High, afraid to go in, afraid to go anywhere, until a teacher hurrying into the building had spotted her and ushered her to Principal Hauser's office. To Lucy's relief, the man had actually believed her story about being sick that morning. He'd welcomed her warmly and offered deep condolences for her loss. He'd praised her high grades from her former school, and he'd talked about how wonderful Aunt Irene was. He'd gone on and on about some festival the school was having, and how he hoped she'd enjoy living in Pine Ridge. Then he'd handed her a schedule, assigned her a locker, given her a tour, and escorted her to class. "Here we are, Lucy. I believe your cousin Angela has Miss Calloway this hour, too." Wonderful. My morning's complete. He'd interrupted a pop history quiz to introduce her, leaving her to stand like an idiot at the front of the room while Miss Calloway tried not to look annoyed, and all the kids had stared. She'd felt flushed and panicky and embarrassed. Some of the kids were laughing, she'd noticed. Some of the girls whispering to each other, some of the guys whistling loudly. And then she'd spotted Angela, sitting in the very back row, snickering loudest of all. It wasn't till she'd run to the bathroom afterward that Lucy realized she had dead leaves stuck in her hair and mud spattered over her clothes. She'd stared at her sorry reflection in the mirror and felt so mortified she'd actually considered hiding in there the rest of the day. Wonderful, Lucy, just wonderful. Leave it to you to make a great first impression. But at least the humiliation had distracted her. At least it had kept her from dwelling on the cemetery, The murdered girl. Byron. Thank God lunch was over now. She had only a few more hours to get through. By the time Lucy found her next class, her head was pounding. Dull ribbons of pain crept down one side of her face and unfurled behind her eyes. She was achy and stiff, her shoes and socks were damp, and she still hadn't had anything to eat. Her mind was worn out from worrying. Her brain had turned to mush. She didn't have a clue how she was going to make it through math. Like a robot, she slid into her assigned desk and saw Angela sitting right beside her, the dark raccoon eyes fixed on her accusingly. "I've been thinking about that jacket of yours," Angela frowned, leaning toward her. Lucy braced herself. "What about it?" "It looks really familiar to me. In fact, I have one exactly like it." "I know." Lucy kept her gaze lowered. "Irene said I could borrow it." "And you didn't even ask me?" "You were already gone, and she said you never wear it anyway because she gave it to you." "I can't believe this!" Angela pulled back as several kids squeezed between them, book bags swinging dangerously. "Look at it! It's totally ruined!" Someone bumped Lucy's desk and murmured an apology. She glanced up to see the back of his faded jacket as he leaned over the desk in front of hers. Then Angela snapped her back to attention. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you," Lucy sighed. "I'll pay to have it cleaned, okay?" "You'll pay to buy me another one, is what you mean. God, who do you think you are?" To Lucy's relief, Mrs. Lowenthal called the class to order and instructed them to take out their books. Then, while the woman droned on and on about numbers that made no sense, Lucy tried to ignore the venomous looks Angela kept shooting at her from across the aisle. "Don't let her get to you. Right now, Angela's the least of your worries." "Announcements regarding the Fall Festival," Mrs. Lowenthal was saying. Fall Festival? When had they finished with math? When had they stopped working problems on the chalkboard? Lucy didn't know, hadn't been paying attention. Something soft hit her foot. Glancing down, she saw what looked like a necklace lying there on the floor, but she had no idea where it had come from. Her eyes did a quick sweep of the class, but everyone was focused on the front of the room. Lucy scooted the necklace closer with the toe of her shoe, then picked it up to examine it. It was a simple piece of jewelry, nothing expensive, elaborate, or even professional, she thought. Just a single strand of tiny beads, dark green glass, that looked rather childishly handmade. Pretty, though, in a plain sort of way. "Want all of you there early if you're working a booth," Mrs. Lowenthal continued. Lucy put her left hand to her forehead. Was it just her, or was the room getting hotter by the second? "Big fundraiser of the year, as you all know," Mrs. Lowenthal said. It was getting hotter in here. Lucy was sure of it. She could feel drops of sweat along her hairline. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Those volunteers will meet this afternoon in the library." Maybe I'm coming down with something. Getting a fever. God, I'm burning up. "Be sure to check the schedule to see which shifts you're working." Lucy slid lower in her desk. Her head was way past throbbing now. It felt like it was going to burst. She wound the necklace around her wrist, twined it between her fingers. She could feel the tiny beads cutting into the tender flesh of her palm. "Can use my car to transport some of the food." For a brief second, the room shimmered around her. A tingling pain shot through her hand, and Lucy tried to brace herself against the desktop, tried to prop herself up, but her wrists were so limp, so useless. What's happening? She couldn't hold her head up anymore. She couldn't hear, couldn't see, yet at the same time she could see everything, hear everything, everything all at once, every single sense wide open. What's happening? The classroom vanished. The warmth building steadily inside her now burst into scalding heat, searing through nerves and muscles, throbbing the length of her fingers and upward through her hand, along her arm, exploding inside her head. "I've felt this before. Oh God, just like last night." And then they came. Lightning fast and just as merciless. Images so vivid, so sharp, her body reeled with the force of them. Hands, such powerful hands, eyes glowing through shadows, lips on her neck, her throat, and blood flowing, life flowing. Could have been different. Could have been perfect. Wind. Ah, the cold, sweet rush of it, taste of it, caress of it. Night smells, night sounds, damp and cold. And fog so thick, woods so black, black and deep as... "Death," Lucy murmured. "I'm not afraid to die." And, "Lucy?" Someone saying her name over and over again. "Lucy, Lucy." "Lucy!" Mrs. Lowenthal's voice, anxious and loud. "Lucy, are you all right?" Lucy's eyes flew open. She was slumped on her desk, both arms pillowing her head. She was clutching something in her right hand, and her whole arm felt numb and prickly, as if she'd been shot full of Novocaine. "Lucy?" Mrs. Lowenthal said again. Very slowly, Lucy lifted her head. She could see that the classroom was there again, along with the faces of the students, all of them staring, and Angela smirking beside her, and Mrs. Lowenthal leaning over her with a worried frown. "You're so pale, Lucy. Are you ill? Do you need to be excused?" Lucy tried to answer but couldn't. Instead, she opened her fingers and stared down at the necklace in her hand. "I'll have someone take you to the nurse," Mrs. Lowenthal decided. "Angela can help you. Here, Angela, let me write you a pass." But Lucy wasn't paying attention anymore to Mrs. Lowenthal or Angela, or the curious stares of her classmates. As the guy in front of her turned around, she saw that he'd taken off his jacket. She saw the thick black hair falling soft to his shoulders, and the calm gaze of his midnight eyes. And then she saw him reach back and slide the necklace from her hand. "Thanks," Byron said quietly. "I must have dropped this." Chapter 10. She knew she was going to be sick. As Byron faced forward again, Lucy got to her feet and rushed up the aisle to the door. Then, ignoring an alarmed Mrs. Lowenthal, she hurried down the hall in search of a bathroom. She finally found one near the stairs, barely making it inside before dry heaves took over. She left the stall door open and fell to her knees, sweat pouring down her face, her insides like jelly. She dreaded Mrs. Lowenthal coming to check on her, or even worse, sending Angela. "This might help," a voice said softly. Lucy was too weak to lift her head. She felt a cold, wet paper towel on the back of her neck, a gentle hand smoothing her hair back from each side of her face. She heaved again, but there was nothing in her stomach but pain. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "No need," the voice whispered back to her. "The first time's always the worst." Lucy lifted her head. Turning around, she stared out at the bare floor, at the row of sinks and the dingy mirror stretching over them, reflecting nothing. "Hello?" she called shakily. "Who's there?" Her voice echoed back to her from the bathroom walls. With trembling fingers, she took the paper towel from the back of her neck and got slowly to her feet. One by one, she moved down the row of stalls and opened each door, but they were all empty. The first time's always the worst. Without warning, a group of girls came giggling in from the hallway. Was one of them the kind-hearted stranger? But none of the girls even glanced her way, so Lucy ran fresh water onto the paper towel and blotted it over her face. Mrs. Lowenthal was right. She was pale. frighteningly pale. Think, Lucy, think. Try and calm down. Try to put things in perspective. Perspective? How could she possibly be calm or rational about all the things that had happened to her in the last 24 hours? She was way past confusion now, way beyond frightened. Something had taken hold of her back there in the classroom. Something had consumed her back there in the classroom. Something she didn't understand, and certainly hadn't been able to control. Something had crept over her and through her, transporting her to another place and time. She'd seen things, felt things, horrible things, intense and painful and terrifyingly real. And yet there'd been no complete picture, Lucy realized. Nothing like a carefully posed photograph, or neatly framed painting, or smooth sequence of movie scenes running logically through her mind. No, this had been different. Just flashes of things, glimpses of things, puzzle pieces spilled helter-skelter from a box. Things without order, things that made no sense, though she felt that they should make sense, and did make sense somehow, if only she could put them together. Frowning, she stared down at her hand. The strange crescent scar stood out sharply against her palm, and there was a faint, lingering ache along her fingertips. The necklace. Lucy shut her eyes, opened them again, drew a slow intake of breath. There was darkness and death, and it started when I picked up that necklace. The bathroom door swung shut. As Lucy turned in surprise, she realized that all the girls had left, and that Angela was now standing beside her. "I've been looking all over for you." Angela gave an exasperated sigh. "What the hell happened back there?" Lucy couldn't answer. She watched dully as her cousin leaned toward the mirror and primped at her hair. "Well?" Angela demanded. "I felt like I was going to pass out," Lucy murmured. "I've never seen anyone shake like that before they passed out," Angela said, casting Lucy a critical glance. "God, you look even worse now than you did last night. Whatever you've got, you better not be contagious." "Who's the guy in class?" Lucy asked tersely. "What are you talking about?" "The dark-haired guy sitting in front of me." "Byron?" Lucy nodded, tight-lipped. "Well, what about him?" Tilting her head, Angela gave her hair one more fluff. "Oh, please, don't tell me you're interested." Lucy merely shrugged. "Right. Another smitten female falls under the spell of the mysterious Byron Weatherly," Angela announced. Then her lips curled in a dry smile. "Well, yeah, he's gorgeous. And sexy. And so very, very cool. But, you know, every girl in school is after him." She paused a moment, as if considering a matter of great importance. Then she lifted one eyebrow, amused. "Frankly, Lucy, I wouldn't bet on your chances." Ignoring the remark, Lucy pulled a fresh paper towel from the dispenser. "What do you mean mysterious? Why is he mysterious?" "Well, who knows anything about him, really? He keeps pretty much to himself." "Maybe he's shy." "He doesn't talk much, but with a face and body like that, why would he need to?" "I see." Lucy played along. "The quiet, secretive type. That's what makes him mysterious." "Not just that, his family, too." "So his family's mysterious." "They're poor." Tilting her head sideways, Angela studied her profile in the glass. "And extremely weird. I mean, the word is that Byron must be adopted or something. He's the only normal one in the whole bunch. He lives with his grandmother. Well, takes care of his grandmother. She's an invalid. His mother's been locked up for years." Lucy looked startled. "Locked up? As in loony bin? As in institution?" Angela pointed to the side of her head and made wide circles with her finger. As in psychopathic maniac? Yes, Angela, I get it. What's wrong with her? She murdered her kids. Come on, you're not serious. Burned down the house with them in it. Oh, for God's sake, it happened years ago. I'm not sure anyone around here even remembers the woman personally. It's just something everyone knows about. Angela paused, thought for a second, then once again faced the mirror. You know, like a campfire story, or one of those urban legends. But what about Byron? Lucy asked. Well, obviously he got out, didn't he? Him and his crazy sister. Are you finished in here? Lucy nodded. She ran some water over the towel, squeezed it out, then pressed it against her cheeks, stalling for a little more time. So, is the mom in prison? She asked. Angela rolled her eyes. No, just in a straitjacket for the rest of her life. Poor Byron. I mean, can you even imagine? Everyone knowing your mother's a cold-blooded killer? And like that's not bad enough, that sister of his was turning out just as bad. It was only a matter of time before she got carted off to the funny farm. Lucky for everybody, she ended up leaving town before anything really horrible happened. I guess that was lucky, Lucy agreed quietly. So tell me about the sister. She saw things. Another dramatic sigh. Well, at least that's what she wanted people to believe. She saw things. You mean, like hallucinations? Call them whatever you want. She called them visions. Lucy's heart caught in her chest. She was feeling colder by the second. What kinds of visions? How would I know? I never saw her have one. Angela sounded impatient. Telling the future and talking to the dead kinds of visions, I guess. I mean, the girl was way creepy. So she never had a vision in school? Lucy's voice was scarcely a whisper. She didn't go to school. She didn't go anywhere, really. I mean, nobody ever saw her. Then if nobody ever saw her, how do you know she even existed? Angela gave a sniff of disdain. Well, nobody normal ever saw her. Nobody I know ever saw her. But there were stories, you know. Leaning closer to her reflection, she rubbed at a tiny smudge of lipstick on her tooth. Sometimes people would drive past the Weatherly place at night, and they'd see her watching from an upstairs window with bars on it. And sometimes people just going down that road at night would hear screams coming from inside the house. That's why they never let her out. She was totally dangerous. Despite her uneasiness, Lucy frowned. Sounds like old wives' tales to me. Whatever. But she ran away last year, so that was a big relief to everybody. Especially to Byron, I imagine. I mean, God, how humiliating. So not cool for his social life. Now there's only him and his grandmother. She paused, her brow creasing in thought. Good thing he's so gorgeous. He certainly doesn't have good breeding going for him. Then how can you really know him? Lucy asked tightly. How can you be so sure he's not like his mother, or his sister? How can you be sure he doesn't stalk unsuspecting victims, or murder girls in cemeteries, or see into a person's mind? Well, Angela's look was blank. That's just silly. Why is it silly? You said he keeps to himself, that no one really knows him. God, what is this whole obsessing thing? What about his life away from school? What about his private thoughts? What about his feelings? Angela made no effort to hide her amusement. His feelings? Oh, I'd like to feel him all right. In places besides my fantasies. Just like every other female around here. She stepped back from the mirror. She ran a slow gaze over Lucy, then shook her head in mock disappointment. Poor Lucy. Take my advice, okay? Forget about Byron. As a matter of fact, forget about anybody. You look like you've been run over by a bus, and you just had some kind of weird fit, not to mention nearly throwing up, in the middle of class. I mean, it's so embarrassing. Everybody already thinks you're a freak, and it's only your first day. It took all Lucy's effort to compose herself. She wadded up her paper towel, tossed it into the trash, and carefully smoothed the front of her sweater. You know what? I'm actually feeling much better. In fact, I don't think I even need to see the nurse now. Then why'd I waste my time trying to find you? Biting back a reply, Lucy followed Angela back to class. Byron didn't even glance at her as she slid into her seat. Didn't seem to feel her eyes boring into him as she tried to ignore the stares and whispers around her. He was out of his chair as soon as the bell rang, and though Lucy hurried to catch up with him, he'd already disappeared into the crowded hallway by the time she reached the door. She didn't see him again the rest of the afternoon, neither in class nor on campus. As though he'd vanished from her life just as quickly as he'd appeared. By the time the final bell rang, Lucy was never so glad to have a day end. It took every last effort just to drag herself to her locker. Everywhere she turned, there was talk about the big weekend ahead, exciting plans for the fall festival, but all she planned on doing was locking herself in her room and staying in bed. She was just rechecking her homework assignments when Angela showed up, greeting her with a sullen frown. "Hurry up," Angela complained. "I have better things to do than stand around and wait for you all day." "You just got here. You've been waiting for, what, 2 whole seconds? Do you want a ride or not?" Lucy slammed her locker door. Lowering her head, she did a quick assessment of her books, oblivious to the kids shoving past her till she felt a quick, light pressure on her arm. "What?" Startled, she looked up. Angela was standing several feet away, watching her with growing impatience. "What?" Angela echoed. "Did you just touch me?" Yet even as she asked, Lucy knew it hadn't been Angela. Somehow, in that precise moment, she knew it was the girl who'd come to her aid in the bathroom. "That's impossible. How could I know that?" "What are you talking about?" Angela frowned. Immediately, Lucy stood on tiptoes, anxiously scanning the corridor. It was packed with students eager to start the weekend, but none of them seemed to be paying any attention to her. "This is just crazy." "Someone touched my arm," Lucy insisted. Puzzled, she turned to Angela, who was now making an exaggerated show of checking her watch. "You think?" Angela threw back at her. "I mean, there are only about 1 million people around here bumping into each other." "No, but..." "But what?" "This was different. It wasn't an accident. She who? She what?" "She wanted me to know." The realization came to Lucy with warm, calm clarity. "She did it on purpose because she wanted me to know she was here, that she was real, that I didn't imagine her—" "You're not going to have another fit, are you?" Angela was regarding her warily. "Because if you are, I'm leaving." "No," Lucy murmured, taking one last puzzled look around. "No, I'm ready." "Then let's go." For once, Lucy didn't mind Angela's music blaring. In fact, she hardly even noticed it at all. While her cousin sang loudly off-key all the way home, Lucy leaned her head against the window and tried to sort out all the troubling events of the day. Explanations? None. Logic? None. Worry factor? Definitely rising. And Byron. She could still see those dark, dark eyes searching hers, hear the edge in that low, deep voice, feel those strong hands on her shoulders. It was his ominous warning that had finally convinced her not to report the dead girl. At least, not yet. She'd been frightened of him, still was frightened of him, only now that fear was tempered with an almost fascinated curiosity. He had answers, she was sure of it, but answers to things she wasn't sure she wanted to pursue. As the car pulled into the driveway, Lucy wished she could ask her cousin more about Byron, but she didn't dare. Her life was complicated enough already without having Angela any more involved. The house was empty when they went in. As Lucy shut herself in her room, she thought she heard Angela scrolling through the messages on the answering machine. Thought there might be one from Irene, though she couldn't make it out. She stood for a moment with her back against the door, eyes closed, weary relief flooding through her body. And then her eyes opened with a start. What's that smell? A very faint fragrance, and pleasantly sweet, yet nothing she recognized, nothing she could recall ever having smelled before. Frowning, Lucy dropped her stuff on the desk and walked to the sliding glass doors. She opened them all the way, letting in crisp fall air. Then she stepped out onto the balcony and stared off across the lengthening shadows over the lawn. The woods still looked menacing, even in the last few hours of daylight. A slight breeze was blowing, and as Lucy gazed into the trees' shifting patterns of darkness and fading autumn colors, a shiver crept slowly up her spine. That feeling again. That feeling of being watched. Bad habit, Lucy muttered. Get over it, for crying out loud. Irritated with herself, she turned back into the room. She took a few steps, then stopped abruptly by the bed. That's strange. Despite the fresh air blowing in, she could still smell that aroma. Delicate, sweet, and something else. Lucy tilted her head, breathed deeply and long. The fragrance flowed down easy, soft and smooth as wine, velvet in her veins. Intoxicating. Yes, that's it. Intoxicating. Light-headed, Lucy reached out a hand toward her bed. She sat down unsteadily, then lay back and closed her eyes. The scent floated from the covers. Like an exotic perfume, it rose up around her, enveloped her from every side. Sheets, blankets, pillows, comforter, even her nightclothes, which she'd carelessly tossed across the headboard that morning in her hurry to dress. It seeped into the pores of her skin and brushed softly across her eyelids and tingled along the fingertips of her right hand. And that's when Lucy realized. That's when it hit her full force that someone had been in here today. In her room. And in her bed. Chapter 11. Lucy, what the hell are you doing? Lucy could hear Angela shouting at her from the bathroom doorway, but she didn't care. She didn't care, and she didn't stop. She kept right on stripping the linens from her bed. Lucy, did you hear me? You know we have a cleaning lady who does that. I don't care about the cleaning lady. I don't want to wait for the cleaning lady. I want these off now. I want them washed. I want clean sheets. I want a new bedspread. I want— Have you totally lost your mind? Angela yelled. Florence was here today. Everything already is clean. Lucy froze. She stood there like a statue, then very slowly turned around. Today? She murmured. You mean the cleaning lady? Florence, yes, our cleaning lady. She always comes on Fridays. That's not true. My room's different. Someone was in my room. You've hardly come out of your room since the first day you got here, Angela reminded her sharply. Irene told Florence not to go in there till you felt better, so today she cleaned it. No, that's not right. Lucy stared at her cousin with a puzzled frown. Of course it made perfect sense. Of course it must be true. There's a smell, she finished lamely. Angela came farther into the room and sniffed. Well, yeah, probably air freshener, or furniture polish, or stuff she puts in the carpet. Florence always sprays everything around here, especially when we've been sick or something. No, that's not right. You are so weird, Angela glowered at her. Didn't anybody ever use air freshener where you came from?" Lucy didn't answer. She sank down onto the foot of the bed and gazed in bewilderment at the sheets and blankets piled around her on the floor. "Put on something warm," Angela said then. "We're going to the festival." "What?" Lucy looked up just in time to see her cousin disappear into the bathroom. "We're doing... what?" "Going to the festival!" Angela's voice hollered back to her. "It's Friday night. I can't stand to be here one more second." "But you're not supposed..." Lucy began, then stopped. Not a good idea to let Angela know she'd eavesdropped this morning, that she'd heard Irene grounding the girl. But not a good idea either, aiding and abetting a criminal. Your choice. Get out or stay in this creepy room. She heard the shower running, so she went over and shut the door. Then she crossed her arms over her chest and leaned back against the wall, studying her bed as though it were some unwelcome alien dropped in her midst. "I don't believe you, Angela. Why don't I believe you?" Lucy was beginning to think Angela might be right, that maybe she truly was losing her mind. Some sweet-smelling air spray had sent her into a complete tailspin. She'd jumped to the most ridiculous conclusion. Someone in her room? Well, of course someone had been in her room. Florence had been in her room, simply doing her job. And yet... Lucy chewed mercilessly on a fingernail. Something inside her, deep inside her, still felt uneasy. Uneasy and unconvinced. Why? She'd always been so sensible, so logical, always prided herself on her level-headedness. But that was before the cemetery, she reminded herself now. Before the girl in the grave. Before all the other crazy things that had happened to her. Before I started jumping at every shadow and letting my imagination spin entirely out of control. "Florence," Lucy said firmly to herself. "Florence, Florence, Florence. Florence, the cleaning lady." But no, her mind answered her without the slightest hesitation. No, not Florence. Someone else. "Lucy!" Startled, Lucy looked up to see Angela glaring at her from the doorway again. "Irene has a very important meeting tonight that'll last till at least 11. If we leave now, we can beat her home." Lucy couldn't resist. "And why would we want to do that?" "I've been having some car trouble." Angela didn't miss a beat. "I promised her I wouldn't be out on those dirt roads after dark. Just, in case something should happen." "I see. So if we're back early, she won't have to know about it. I mean, I wouldn't want her to worry." Lucy shook her head. "Of course not." "So come on." The door slammed between them, and Lucy gazed at it for a few seconds, wrestling with her conscience. It would be better than staying here in this room right now. And since she wasn't supposed to know Angela was grounded, she certainly wouldn't be the one in trouble if Irene discovered they'd gone out. Besides, Lucy reasoned, doing this for Angela might help make a truce between them. It was just the fall festival, after all. And what could possibly happen to them at a festival? Chapter 12. He'd been fascinated when he'd first seen her, that beautiful girl at the window. He hadn't been able to turn away, gazing at her through the trees, through the rain. He hadn't expected anyone to be there, hadn't even realized there was a house at the edge of the woods. Once his work was done at the graveyard, he'd needed a safer, darker sanctuary, and so instinct had driven him deep into the moonless shelter of the forest. He often prowled after he'd killed. City streets, neighborhoods, country roads, any convenient place to work off those lingering effects of restlessness and release. He hunted unhindered, undetected, unseen. It amused him to stand over people while they slept, people who didn't know he was there, people unaware that their lives were in his power. With one quick decision, he could determine if they awakened tomorrow, or if they languished for hours or days on end, or if their hearts stopped suddenly, mid-beat, without the slightest warning, just as his heart had had no warning when he saw her there at the window. He'd watched her curiously, the light glowing pale behind her, the outline of her soft, sweet curves beneath the flimsy fabric of her nightdress. At one point he thought she might have seen him too, for she was peering at the woods, at the low stone wall, but he was always much quicker than a glance. He'd been a shadow for a while, and then a wisp of fog. He'd watched her unbuttoning her gown, the delicate swell of her breasts as she'd leaned forward against the glass, and then he'd been outside on her balcony as she'd slid open the doors and gotten drenched from the rain. He'd reached out and touched her cheek, but she hadn't known. He could have gone inside with her, but he'd waited. He didn't need an invitation, not from her, not from anyone. He went where he pleased, when he pleased, how he pleased. But her sorrow had stopped him. Like a fragile aura, it surrounded her and flowed from her. He could feel the palpable grief, the vulnerability and despair, and though it would have been so easy, so pleasurable to take her then, he'd decided against it. He'd taken the other girl instead. The other girl had left her window open just the tiniest crack, and he'd slipped through the screen, slipped right inside on the cold, wet breeze, and he'd stayed till nearly dawn. Even in slumber, she'd reeked of anger and rebellion, and he'd found this exciting, this wild, defiant nature so very much like his own. She'd thought she was dreaming, of course. When he'd pulled down her covers without the slightest disturbance, when he'd caressed her naked body with his eyes, his hands, his mind. Her thighs had parted, her back had arched. Such a delicious nightmare, inviting him to join her. He usually came as a dream, at least the first time, a dream that lingered long past waking, like a deep, slow burning that could not be satisfied. And when he'd finally left her, languid and sated with his memory, he'd waited in the woods behind the house. He'd waited for the sun to come up and the house to be empty, and then he'd willed himself onto that balcony and let himself in through the sliding glass doors. Her name was Lucy, he discovered. Lucy. He'd found it stamped on an airline ticket that she'd tossed on her dresser. He'd seen it written on a luggage tag still attached to a suitcase full of clothes. Lucy. Lucy Dennison. He hadn't expected an interruption. He'd paused and listened, mildly annoyed, as the back door unlocked, as the kitchen cupboards banged open and shut, as the cleaning lady made her slow, labored journey up the stairs and down the hall. But still he'd had time to walk around Lucy's room, to touch Lucy's things, and in those last few seconds before taking his leave, to lie down, smiling, in Lucy's bed. Chapter 13. "Why don't you drive?" Angela insisted as she opened the garage door. Lucy paused beside the little red Corvette, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Good one, Angela. Now you can honestly say you didn't drive your car anywhere except back and forth to school." "Me? Oh no, I'd rather you did. I mean, if you've been having trouble with it." "The thing is," Angela said quickly, "is that I'm sort of getting a headache." "Oh, well then maybe we'd better stay home." "I can't. I shouldn't. I promised my friends. You know, I'm supposed to be working one of the booths tonight at the fair, so I have to at least show up and help." Was she telling the truth? Lucy doubted it, but told herself it didn't matter anyway. What was more important right now was just getting out of the house and getting along with her cousin. "So what exactly is this fall festival?" she asked. as Angela guided her through the neighborhood and toward the opposite end of town. Angela slumped down in her seat and sounded bored. "It's the school's biggest fundraiser, and they have it every year." "That's it?" "It's like a fair, okay?" The girl gave an exasperated sigh. "They do it every year. Anyone can participate, so the school rents space to set up booths, and then we get to keep whatever money we make. Lots of people come in from other towns, and there's like this little carnival, and they have food and stupid crafts for sale, and dumb games and prizes and stuff." Lucy was only half listening, driving with one hand, using the other to fiddle with the radio. "Sounds fascinating. So where do you work?" "Hey, that's my favorite station," Angela complained. "What do you think you're doing?" "I just wanted to catch the news. Just for 1 second, okay?" "One. Thanks. Now, where do you work?" "Pin the nose on the scarecrow." "Really?" The announcer was highlighting the day's local headlines: Fall Festival, daycare facility closing, fender bender on the old highway. "You make scarecrows?" No mention of dead bodies, no girls in open graves, no murders in Pine Ridge. I couldn't have imagined it all, could I? Did I imagine Byron, too? And the necklace in class? And the girl in the bathroom? And the scar on my hand? "Watch out!" Angela yelped. "What is wrong with you?" Startled, Lucy swung the car back to her own side of the road. "Sorry." "Well, it might help if you stopped looking at your hand and kept both of them on the steering wheel, for God's sake." "Sorry." Lucy's brain struggled to re-engage. "What were you saying about scarecrows?" "I said, of course I don't make scarecrows. It's a game. You blindfold people and spin them around, and then they have to stick this ridiculous nose on the scarecrow." "Like pin the tail on the donkey?" "Exactly. And if you get the nose in the right place, you win a prize. Except we use Velcro, not pins." "What kind of prize?" Angela sighed. "A scarecrow doll. What do you think?" "Well, it sounds kind of fun." "Yeah, if you have no life. Turn here." Lucy did as she was told. They followed a narrow strip of blacktop for about 10 minutes, then turned off again onto an even narrower dirt road, this one winding off through thickly wooded countryside for several more miles. "That's it up there," Angela finally announced. To Lucy's relief, she saw the fairgrounds up ahead, a noisy carnival bright with lights and busy with activity. Across the road and a good walk away stretched a large unlit field where kids with flashlights directed traffic and motioned them to their parking spot. "Okay," Angela said, unstrapping her seatbelt. "Why don't we just meet back here about 10:30? Lucy looked doubtful. "You're sure that's enough time to not worry Irene?" She remembered to say, "I mean, how can you know for sure how long her meeting will be?" "Trust me, it's a stupid disciplinary committee, and they never end before 11. Night's the only time they can get everyone together without having other very important meetings to go to." "What kind of discipline?" Lucy couldn't help asking. "A bunch of stupid frat guys. They're always such jerks, and they're always in some kind of trouble. I mean, you'd think they'd learn by now that it's not cool to get drunk and act like total idiots in the cemetery." Lucy's hand froze on the door handle. "What about the cemetery?" "Some guys went into the cemetery last night and got drunk and were messing around, and I guess somebody saw them and complained." It was all Lucy could do to keep her voice casual. "What were they doing, do you know?" "The usual stuff, probably. Breaking things, stealing things, spray painting the headstones. Just your usual damage to private property. Oh, and I always love this one. Making out with their girlfriends on the graves." "So," Lucy could barely choke out the words, "it was just a joke?" "Well, they thought it was, but they're going to get suspended and their fraternity will get put on probation." Angela thought a minute, then gave a wry smile. "That's the part Irene really likes, the punishment part." But Lucy wasn't listening anymore. As she got the door open and climbed out, her mind was spinning with rage and disbelief. A joke! Kids drunk and playing pranks! No wonder there hadn't been any news coverage, no murder investigations, no reports of missing girls, and all the agony she'd suffered, the terror, the guilt and regret and horror and... "Are you coming?" Angela was waving at her from the other side of the car. "The festival's this way! God, I can't believe they made us park way out here in all this mud." Yet that still didn't explain her encounter with Byron that morning, Lucy reminded herself, following Angela through the field. Still didn't explain the things he'd said, the things he'd known. Unless he was part of that joke, too. Unless he was there last night with those other guys, and he guessed I might come back this morning, and he wanted to scare me into not saying anything. If you tell anyone, you could die. They wouldn't believe you anyway. "Did you hear me?" Angela snapped. "What? Sorry, what?" Still doesn't explain Byron. Still doesn't explain a lot of things. "I said, let's just meet back here at the car. Are you listening to me?" "Yes," Lucy murmured. "I'm listening. 10:30, here at the car." She felt betrayed, mortified and furious at being the butt of such a cruel, twisted joke. How those guys must be laughing at her right now, if, in fact, they even remembered the sick charade they'd carried out last night. "Okay," Angela said. "See you later." They parted at the main gate, but Lucy stood on the sidelines for a moment, taking everything in. It was after 6 now, and the fall festival was in full swing. Angela was right about one thing, she noted. It seemed the whole town had turned out for the event. The whole town and a whole lot more. The place was packed with people in the mood for fun. Lines were already long at the concession stands, and the air throbbed with loud music and the wild rumble of rides, the carousel calliope, and barkers hawking games of various skills and staminas. Lucy could smell food from every direction: hot dogs, donuts, cotton candy, barbecue. For the first time in hours, she actually realized how hungry she was. She'd barely eaten anything since yesterday. She bought a greasy hamburger and a watered-down Coke and ate while she walked. It had been years since she'd been to anything like a carnival, and it brought back happy memories of her childhood, of her and Mom off together on their special adventures. Despite the tasteless food and poignant memories, she actually began to feel better. And despite the pain and embarrassment of her entire day, she felt herself almost smile. She tossed her trash into a bin and kept walking, squeezing her way in and out through the crowds. The night was chilly, the breeze sharp, but not unbearable in her flannel shirt and oversized parka. She was glad she'd opted to leave her purse at home tonight. With her money and ID tucked tightly into the pocket of her jeans, she felt a lot safer. Safer. That's funny. For some reason, the irony of that nearly brought another smile to her face. She paused at a booth selling candy apples. She bought one and bit through the hard, sticky sweetness, and then she headed back into the crowd. The slow, shivery prickle at the back of her neck had nothing to do with the cold. Lucy stopped, and 3 people ran into her from behind. She felt a sharp burst of pain as her upper lip split between the candy apple and her 2 front teeth. Mumbling apologies, she worked her way back over to a booth and stood with her back to the wall. She could feel the blood swelling from the cut, and she wiped it carelessly with the back of her hand. Her eyes roamed anxiously over the teeming mobs of people. Someone's following me. I feel it. Just like last night, when she'd run from those footsteps, when she'd run from one nightmare straight into another. She didn't see anything suspicious, of course. In that solid mass of faces, how would she? And after all that had happened in the last 2 days, Lucy wasn't even sure how much she could trust her own instincts anymore. She dabbed at the blood on her lip. She took another survey of the crowd. "You're imagining things. Enough's enough. Pull yourself together, for crying out loud." She was almost past the carousel when she saw him. He was moving quickly, shoving his way toward her through the mob, and as she recognized his face, Lucy instantly turned and headed the opposite way. "Lucy!" she heard him yell, but she didn't answer, didn't even acknowledge him, just kept walking. "Lucy, wait! We've got to talk!" She thought she could outrun him, but Byron caught up with her easily, grabbing her arm and forcing her around. Dropping her apple, Lucy twisted furiously from his grasp. "Haven't you done enough already?" she exploded. The look he gave her was grim, his voice low and urgent. "Come on, we can't talk here." "You've had your fun, okay? Now leave me alone." "Fun? What fun? What is this? Those frat guys playing jokes at the cemetery. And you were there too. That's how you knew I'd come back. Well, are you proud of yourself?" "I don't have a clue what you're talking about, but please just listen to me." "I've listened to you enough. Now I'm going." With one smooth movement, Byron caught her shoulders and steered her over to a booth. Then, pinning her flat against the wall, he leaned down over her, his black eyes narrowed. "There are things you need to understand." "No, you need to understand." Lucy tried to break free, but he only held her tighter. "If you don't leave me alone right now, I'm going to scream as loud as I can and have you arrested." "Look, I know you're scared. You have every right to be. What happened last night was horrible, and you have no reason in the world to trust me. But you have to. You have to meet me tomorrow." "I'm not meeting you anywhere." "The old church, 9 o'clock. She opened her mouth to scream. She felt his fingers dig into her shoulders as he gave her a firm, quick shake. "You saw something today," he said. His lips moved soft against her ear. His voice dropped to a whisper. "When you touched the necklace, you saw something happen. You know it, and so do I." This time when she struggled, he let her go. Lucy bolted into the crowd, frantically shoving her way through, not caring where she ran, only desperate to get away. She looked back once and thought she saw him following. Instinctively, she veered from the midway, cut behind the Ferris wheel, and raced down a narrow path between two busy picnic shelters. It took her a minute to realize she'd lost him, another minute to catch her breath and get her bearings. She bent over, hands on knees, and took deep gulps of air, waiting for her heartbeat to return to normal. Then slowly she lifted her head. That smell. Frowning, Lucy glanced at her surroundings. It was darker back here, and though several groups of people had congregated nearby to socialize, the booths had thinned out, giving way to weeds and trash dumpsters and a tall wire fence. Great, I must be at the back of the fairgrounds. The night seemed colder. Without the insulation of the crowds, Lucy felt the sting of the wind and tugged her parka tight around her. Even the air felt different, she realized. Softer and heavier and mysterious somehow. Ripe with the scent of woods and fields and deep lake waters. And that other smell. She could feel her heart quickening again in her chest, her throat constricting, the blood chilling in her veins. That other familiar smell. That sweet, lingering smell that had filled her room and her bed.